I thought the Christmas spirit was harmless, until my HOA president called my light display a public safety hazard. The man actually tried to fine me for celebrating Christmas, and the craziest part? His house had lights too. It started with a letter, a single sheet of white paper tucked under my doormat, stamped with the HOA's seal like it was some kind of royal decree. Notice of violation, unauthorized holiday display. I actually laughed when I first saw it. It was early December. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon, and I'd just finished stringing the last strand of lights around the roofline. My wife had queued up Home Alone inside, but that laughter didn't last long, because this wasn't just a warning, it was a demand. The HOA president, Mr. Clifford Dale, claimed my Christmas lights were too bright, too numerous, and potentially distracting to drivers. He gave me 48 hours to remove them, or face a $200 fine. Now mind you, half the block had already started decorating, inflatable Santas, snowmen, even a light-up reindeer or two, but somehow mine were unauthorized. At first I thought it was a mix-up. Clifford was known for being strict, sure. The guy once fined a family because their mailbox flag was too faded, but when I walked over to his house to talk, I noticed something strange. His own front yard was lit up with white icicle lights. Not as many as mine, but definitely still there. When I knocked on his door, he opened it halfway, like I was selling something. "Evening, Clifford," I said. "I think there's been some mistake about this violation notice." He gave me that tight HOA smile. "No mistake, Mark. Your lights violate Section 14B of the Aesthetic Uniformity Code. You're setting a precedent that'll make this neighborhood look like a carnival." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You've got lights up, too." He tilted his head. "Mine are compliant, yours aren't." And with that, he shut the door. If you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA or that one neighbor who thinks they run the whole street, you're gonna want to stick around for this one. Hit that subscribe button, because what happened next, nobody in the neighborhood saw coming. That was the moment it stopped being funny. The next morning, I woke up to find one of my extension cords cut clean through. Not chewed, not frayed. Cut. Someone had come into my yard overnight. My wife was furious. My daughter cried because her twinkly roof lights wouldn't turn on. That's when I decided this wasn't about decorations. This was personal. I spent that afternoon reviewing the HOA's bylaws. Every page of the 47-page rulebook Clifford handed out when we moved in. And there it was, buried deep in Section 14B. It mentioned holiday lighting restrictions, but said they applied only if approved by majority vote during an HOA board meeting. No such vote had ever happened. I'd been to every meeting that year. So technically, his ban wasn't even enforceable. I took photos of his lights, screenshots of the bylaws, and the notice he'd sent me. Then I decided to do what Clifford never expected. I put my lights back up, twice as many this time. That night he stormed over, didn't even knock. "You're violating HOA code," he shouted from my driveway. "Actually," I said, holding up my phone, "you're violating your own." He froze. For a second, I thought he might rip the lights down himself, but instead he hissed, "You'll regret this, Mark. You don't know how these things work." The next morning, a new notice appeared, this time taped directly to my mailbox. "Final warning. Continued violation will result in legal escalation." But Clifford wasn't ready for what came next, because while he was busy threatening me, the rest of the neighborhood had been watching. One by one, my neighbors started adding more lights. First a few strings, then entire displays. The Jacksons across the street put up a 10-foot snowman. The Coopers installed synchronized music lights that blinked to Jingle Bell Rock. Within 3 days, the block looked like a Christmas miracle, a glowing protest. And Clifford? He lost it. He started walking door to door, taking photos, muttering about fines and violations. But this time it wasn't just me standing up. The entire street was pushing back. Still, I had a feeling he wouldn't stop there, because I'd noticed something strange on my security cam that night. A dark SUV parked across the street, lights off, engine running. For hours. Something told me this was only the beginning. The next few nights the SUV came back, always parked in the same spot, always around 9 p.m., always leaving right after midnight. At first I thought maybe Clifford had hired private security or some HOA volunteer patrol. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The SUV had no license plates. That's when I decided to check the footage closely. I went through my doorbell cam, the backyard motion sensor, and the driveway camera I'd installed last summer. At 11:47 p.m. sharp, the SUV door opened, and a man stepped out holding what looked like a clipboard and a flashlight. He walked right up to my house, shining the beam along the eaves, counting my lights. Then he took photos. The following morning, another letter appeared, this time a fine notice for continued non-compliance. It demanded $500. That's when I knew Clifford wasn't just bluffing anymore. He was escalating. I called the HOA's management company to appeal. The woman on the line hesitated before saying, "Sir, your HOA president submitted photographic evidence. There's not much we can do unless you can prove misconduct." Prove misconduct. That was all I needed to hear, so I called my friend Tom, a retired deputy who lived 2 streets over. He'd dealt with Clifford before over some ridiculous fence height dispute. Tom came over that night with his old patrol flashlight and a grin. "You're saying he's spying on your house? Let's catch him in the act." We set up 2 hidden cameras, one aimed at my front yard from Tom's truck, another from my upstairs window with night vision mode. And sure enough, at 11:46 p.m., the SUV rolled up again. Tom whispered, "He's right on schedule." We watched as the same figure stepped out, clipboard, flashlight, camera. But when he turned his head toward the streetlight, the camera caught his face clear as day. It was Clifford. The next morning, I printed every frame and stapled them to a manila folder labeled Evidence, Unauthorized Surveillance. But before I could even confront him, another bomb dropped. An email hit my inbox from the HOA board signed President Dale, claiming I was in violation of a noise ordinance because of musical light shows disturbing the peace. Except I didn't have any music lights. That was the Coopers. Clifford was clearly trying to bury me under fake complaints. So I called a property lawyer, Diane Laird, who'd helped me once before when the HOA tried to restrict backyard fire pits. When I told her what was happening, she said, "He's abusing his position. If the bylaws weren't voted on, any enforcement action is invalid." Let's verify that. Diane requested the HOA meeting minutes under the Homeowners Association Transparency Act, a law Clifford clearly hoped no one remembered existed. And when we got the records, bingo. There was no record of any lighting vote or amendment. In fact, the last approved change to Section 14B was over 3 years old. In other words, Clifford was enforcing a rule that didn't legally exist. We needed proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding, that he knew he was breaking the rules. So Diane suggested a sting. "Let's send an email pretending to be a concerned homeowner, asking about light restrictions," she said. "If he answers with that same fake clause, we've got intent." So we created a burner email under a neighbor's name, Cynthia from Lot 32. The message was simple. "Hi, Clifford. Just wondering, what are the HOA's official Christmas light limits this year? I want to stay compliant." 2 hours later, Clifford replied, "Same as always, limit of 200 bulbs, no multicolor, must be white only. Anything more violates Section 14B. Fines will be issued as necessary." We had him. There was no such limit anywhere in the bylaws. He'd invented it entirely. Diane smiled when she saw the email. "That's fraud by misrepresentation and possibly harassment. You could sue him personally, not just the HOA, but I wasn't ready to go that far, not yet, because something even bigger was happening. The neighbors were starting to talk. Everyone Clifford had fined or threatened over the years, for leaving a trash can out, for parking wrong, for kids playing too loudly. They were fed up, and now, with the lights incident, they had a rallying cry. People started knocking on my door, asking for copies of the evidence. Tom helped me distribute printouts of the fake bylaws and the surveillance photos. By the weekend, half the neighborhood was on my side. That's when someone, I still don't know who, made a Facebook group called Light Up the Block, Taking Back Our HOA. Overnight, it got 74 members. And by Monday morning, the HOA office inbox was flooded with demands for a special meeting to vote on removing Clifford as president. He didn't know it yet, but his days of unchecked power were about to end. Because this Christmas, the whole block was about to turn his fake rules into his public downfall. By the time the emergency HOA meeting was announced, the neighborhood was buzzing like Christmas Eve itself. Front lawns shimmered with lights, not out of competition anymore, but out of unity. Clifford's ban had done the opposite of what he wanted. It turned neighbors who barely waved at each other into allies ready to fight back. The meeting was set for December 21st, fitting the darkest night of the year. The clubhouse was packed wall to wall, folding chairs, standing room, even a few folks on the porch listening through the open doors. Clifford sat at the front table tapping his pen, his face stiff with the kind of confidence only a man in denial can have. When my name was called to speak, I could feel every pair of eyes in that room. I walked up, holding the manila folder I'd labeled Evidence, Clifford's Violations, Good evening, I said, keeping my voice calm. My name is Mark Willis, Lot 18. I'm here regarding the so-called holiday display violations. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clifford cleared his throat. We're not here for dramatics, Mark. You've been repeatedly warned. I set the folder on the table with a thump. Actually, Clifford, we are here for dramatics. Yours. I handed copies of the HOA bylaws to the board members and highlighted the section he'd been quoting all month. Section 14B says restrictions must be approved by majority vote. I checked the records. No such vote was ever held. You've been issuing fines based on a rule that doesn't exist. One of the board members, Mrs. Patel, frowned and whispered to the treasurer beside her. Clifford's pen froze mid-tap. And that's not all, I continued, pulling out the printed photos. Here's video evidence of Clifford trespassing on private property at 11:47 p.m. 3 nights in a row. Taking photos of my home. No board approval. No written consent. Just him with a flashlight and a clipboard. Gasps filled the room. Clifford stood up, voice cracking. Those images are taken out of context. I was verifying violations. I held up the final piece. The fake email he'd sent to Cynthia from Lot 32. Then explain this, I said. You fabricated an entire lighting limit, 200 bulbs, white only, and cited a rule that doesn't exist. That's fraud, Clifford. You lied to homeowners to threaten them into compliance. The silence that followed was electric. Even the people who once defended him looked away. Then Tom, my retired deputy friend, stood up from the back. Just so everyone knows, he said, trespassing after dark while documenting private property without consent is a violation of state privacy law. I can confirm that much. That's when Clifford snapped. You people don't understand. If we let everyone do whatever they want, this place will fall apart. He slammed his fist on the table, papers flying, but then Mrs. Patel, the board secretary, calmly reached for the microphone. Mr. Dale, she said, you've misused your authority, fabricated policies, and harassed residents. Under Section 4A of our charter, this board has the right to call for your immediate removal as president. The room erupted in applause. Clifford tried to protest, but no one was listening anymore. A vote was called. Hands raised counted one by one. 32 in favor, 1 against. Clifford was officially removed. He stormed out of the clubhouse, red-faced and shaking. But as he did, the room windows lit up with the glow of Christmas lights from every house on the block. It was poetic, his final walk of shame under the very lights he'd tried to ban. In the weeks that followed, the HOA board suspended all pending fines and launched an audit of Clifford's previous rulings. Turns out, he'd issued dozens of bogus citations over the years. Some residents even got refunds. As for me, I didn't press charges. I didn't have to. His reputation was gone. He resigned from the board entirely, sold his house by spring, and moved out quietly. That Christmas, for the first time in years, our neighborhood felt alive. Kids sledded down driveways, music played from porches, and the air smelled like pine, cocoa, and a little bit of victory. On Christmas Eve, I walked outside with my wife to look at the lights. She squeezed my hand and said, "You know, it's kind of beautiful. All this came from one dumb letter." I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Guess sometimes it just takes one spark to light up the whole street." We watched as every house blinked and shimmered in sync, not by design, but by shared defiance. And for once, even the HOA couldn't dim that glow.